Hey everyone, so I hope that you've watched the rest of the videos in this playlist on how to build your own computer. For those of you that have seen the videos about my Linux computer build as well as swapping computer parts, you will recognize some of the parts that I'm using in this video. This computer here is a computer that was given to me. I was told there was something wrong with it, so I took it, troubleshot it, and then once I got it working, I took it apart and cleaned it up. I also disassembled some parts from my other Linux computer to add on to this one, so I'm going to build this one up to be a more powerful computer. The reason why I'm building this computer up instead of my other Linux computer is because, in my opinion, this tower is nicer. The motherboard, the RAM, and the processor are all newer. Check out the specs in the description below. Plus, this one has USB 3.1 slots, whereas the other computer only had USB 2.0 with just, I think it was 2 USB 3.0 slots. On top of that, this processor is liquid cooled, which I will talk about in a moment, and in this case is also slightly bigger and has a better setup for hiding cables and better airflow. In the rest of this video, I will go over these parts that I'm using, and I will speed up the parts where I'm just installing different components and not talking about them. So let's go ahead and get started. So on this computer here, the processor is already installed with the liquid cooling, so I'm not going to mess with that. I took the fan off the compressor back here, so that way I could clean the compressor, clean the fan, but I didn't take anything else off because I don't want to cause any potential leaks. Liquid cooling is great because it's actually more efficient than just airflow coming through a fan to try to cool the heat sink that is attached to the processor, like on my other computer. If you go back and see that, it's got a fan on the front of the heatsink where the heatsink pulls the heat from the processor, and then that air comes through and it cools off the heatsink, which then cools off the processor. And with liquid cooling, it's got liquid over the processor that is cold liquid, so it actually is more efficient than a piece of metal pulling heat. And hoping that good airflow helps keep it cool. The motherboard as well as the power supply unit, or PSU, were both already installed as well, and I'm just going to leave those because that's less hassle to pull apart and then put back in. This is your traditional power supply cable setup. It's not a modular one, so it's going to be a little messy with cables, so cable management is very important with these. I'm going to go ahead and start with the easy stuff, such as the RAM sticks. These are both 8 gigs a piece. They're DDR4. So next up, I'm going to install the fan that goes on the back here on the compressor for the liquid cooling. Another good thing about liquid cooling is that it's generally more quiet than having several fans run on your computer at once. So next up, I'm just going to install this SD card converter here. Some cases are awesome and they'll provide holders for your hard drives. Well, all you got to do is pop it in there, and then in you go. So right here I've got a solid state from my operating system, and I've got 3 spinning drives for all of my extra data. So next I'm going to install an older graphics card. Another reason why I picked this motherboard over the other one, not only is it newer, but it has more PCIe slots, and PCIe, they're faster than PCI slots. So this one is going to be a gigabit network PCIe card. This one here I don't necessarily need in this computer, but I'm going to install it anyways for future use. And this is my SATA PCIe card, and this allows me to have more SATA ports, or add more SATA ports to my motherboard. So next up, I'm going to install a fan on the front of the computer here. So now it's time to hook up all of the rest of my cables here. So this case actually has space back here, and I'm going to utilize that and feed a bunch of these cables through. So that way it's a lot cleaner up front, especially since this case has a see-through side. So I want it to look as nice as possible. These here are going to provide power to my hard drives. Just a quick note, these here are usually used for graphics cards and things of that nature that plug into PCIe but need extra power. They even say PCIe on them. These are also old power connectors that power old hard drives and old CD-ROMs and things of that nature. In our case, this is actually going to power a little screen that's on the front here. What that screen does is it provides power and statistics to the fans. So I can plug in several fans and control them from the front. Before I plug in all of my SATA cables, I'm going to use zip ties, and I'm going to clean up the cables on this backhand side. So the cables are mostly cleaned up on the back side. They don't look real pretty right now. I'm going to put in all the SATA cables, and then we'll get the rest of it cleaned up. So as you can see, we got the cables cleaned up a little bit. Thankfully, they'll be hidden because there's a lot of extra cables that I can't really do much with. And so they'll all be hidden by the case that goes on the back side of the computer, and it is solid. So we're going to go ahead and get that cover on. So I had to go and rearrange some cables to make sure the back side of the case fit properly. And so some of the cables look a little different than what you've seen in the previous part of this video. Anyways, got it all taken care of. Now I've just got to put the front grate in, I got to put the face on, and then I've got to put this other side of the case together. This here was green. I went ahead and painted it red. I prefer this color. This here allows for extra fans, 2 extra fans to be mounted. I don't really need that on this computer, so I didn't mount any more fans, but this here goes on the top and allows for air to escape. Next up is the front of the case here. Again, this was green. I went ahead and painted it red. So got the front of it put on. What's next is the clear side of the case. I'm actually going to put a fan on the back here. I have an option to put two, one in the front, one in the back, but I'm going to put it on the back side of here. So that way it keeps my graphics card cooler. It'll keep the network PCIe card and the SATA PCIe cards all a lot cooler. So plugging in fans that are on the case can be a little tricky. Thankfully, I've got a long enough cable here to get that job done. So now this computer is completely built. It's not too terribly difficult. You can usually have a computer built in about an hour to 2 hours, depending on the size of the computer you're building and whatever peripherals that you add, such as any of the PCIe cards, how many hard drives, and then if you have a regular power supply unit or a modular power supply unit. So the modular ones are usually a little easier, less cables to fight with, less cables in your way, therefore it's a little bit faster, less stuff that you have to put in, obviously a little bit faster as well. But that's all ready to go, and since my operating system is already installed because I pulled that hard drive from another computer, I don't have to install that. All I've got to do is hook it up to a monitor, power it on, and should come up with Linux if everything's done correctly. Okay, so I've got my power plugged in and power supply unit turned on. Got my network cable, my monitor or TV plugged in. Got my mouse and keyboard both plugged in. So can you hear the fans kicking on? Okay, so as you can tell, this is the Linux desktop and we're up and running. So a computer has been successfully built. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.